All right, Julie, you hopped on, so I'm like, okay, let's get started. Totally kidding.
That's funny. I'm going to have dinner, but I'll be listening.
All right, so welcome everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Deanna Stewart. I'm the Deputy Director of Community Engagement here for DCYF. So I'm just going to walk us through the virtual meeting protocols that we all continue to live by at the moment. And we'll do introductions, and then I'll turn it over to Travis Hansen so he can just have like a conversation with you all. So as you all know, just make sure to mute yourselves throughout the meeting. Feel free, this is a smaller group, so I know we've said this before, but feel free to unmute yourself and just have the conversation openly. Unless you're more comfortable putting something in chat, that's totally fine too. We'll be watching the chat. If you do have any issues, technology, you can email us if you can't unmute or go in the chat box. Email us at the dcyf.communityengagement@dcyf.wa.gov. And we'll do introductions. All right, so because we're smaller, I'm just going to let you unmute and have it be a free for all. I won't call you out unless you don't speak. So if you can please share your name, where you're located, whether you're a center, family home, FFN, provider, public attendee, or staff. And then we do have a question. And could you go to the question, Jess? Because we'll probably just share that verbally. So what is your comfort / guilty pleasure TV show? I think Julie wants to go first.
I'm sorry. I was just like, oh, that's hard. And I didn't realize I was not muted. I'm sorry. Like, there's so many.
You said you were having dinner. I thought you were just enjoying your meal.
No, but I do want to go first so I can go have dinner. Okay, so I'm Julie Schroth. I have a center in Port Orchard, which is Kitsap County. And I'm the owner and guilty comfort pleasure show. I mean, I just watched this weird show the other night called The Wilds, but I also watched another one that was, oh gosh, it was so good on HBO Max, but I can't remember what it was called, but it had Patricia Arquette in it. It was so good. Anyway, look up Patricia Arquette. It was really good. Next.
I'll go next. My name's Eric LaFontaine. I am in the Lakewood area and work out of the Olympia office, and I am a DCYF staff on the community engagement team. And my comfort guilty pleasure TV show would be Master Chef. Next.
I'll go next. I'm Nancy Trevina. I work with EOCF in Southwest Washington. We're a Head Start and ECAP provider. And I absolutely love Jeopardy, and I DVR it so that I can watch it when I'll DVR it tonight so I can watch it later.
I can go. My name is Sheree Belt, and I am located in Seattle. I work for a center here. My favorite guilty pleasure TV show, I don't watch a lot of TV either. I'm knee deep in books right now. I am trying to finish Stranger Things. That's about all I got.
I'll go next. Laura Murphy in Yakima, Washington with Taylor Tots Child Care Centers. I have 2 centers here. And I just started some ECAP slots, so I'm excited about that new adventure. And I watch Dateline.
I'll go next. My name is Emily Morgan. I am on the community engagement team at DCYF, and I'm in Spokane. And my favorite TV show is like really anything on Bravo, but like The Real Housewives and Below Deck. I love all of the reality TV.
I go next. My name is Lupe Suarez, and I live in Wenatchee, Washington. My pressure of TV, it will be the news.
All right, I'll go. Deanna Stewart, like I already said at the beginning, let's see, I am in Pierce County. I'm staff at DCYF, and probably comfort shows, I would say, is anything house related. I'm huge on watching any house shows. Not housewives, like Emily mentioned, but house remodeling shows. And I guess guilty pleasure, also Bravo, but more about like flipping out. When it was on Bravo, that was one of my favorites.
I'll go ahead. My name is Brian Trimble. I am the executive director of the Herzog Family Center in Spokane, Washington. Guilty pleasure. I don't really watch TV, but I do play a lot of online cribbage, which nobody should ever openly admit to anyone because it doesn't give you any like credit, no street cred. How about that? But I love playing online cribbage. Such a nerd.
Jessica Spencer with DCYF staff community engagement team in Vancouver, Washington. And I like to rewatch episodes of Schitt's Creek or Scrubs.
Travis Hansen, Senior Child Care Administrator at the department. I am located in Yakima. And I would say probably a guilty pleasure for TV shows would be The Office, because you don't have to think and it just kind of is on. So.
So I saw a couple people join. So Susan, I see you in the chat. Anyone else who's joined? Sandra, I saw you. If you guys want to unmute, just share your name, where you're from, your role, and then answer the question of your comfort or guilty pleasure TV show.
Okay, Susan Brown with Kids Co. We're a nonprofit child care organization in the Seattle area. My guilty pleasure would be a show and a book series called Outlander. Thank you.
And I'm Sandra Nelson, Southeast Seattle with Prem ABC Child Care Center. I'm the director. I love Game Show Network. I can just watch that all day with no problems, even though it's reruns. So.
Well, thank you. Let's see. I just want to make sure I got everybody. Yep. So looks like everyone has introduced themselves. So I am going to actually turn it over to Travis. So Travis is here tonight to talk to you all, just have a conversation about unlicensed care. Really, this came out of for all of you that were at the last meeting, we kind of had the conversation about additional topics to discuss moving forward. And this was one of the topics that rose to the top. So Travis is joining this evening to have that conversation with you all. So take it away, Travis.
Great. Thank you for having me. First off, I don't have a PowerPoint or anything to go off of. And what I really want to do is share kind of our process and then have a conversation where it gives you all a chance to ask questions and talk about it. It is kind of my thought. So I'll start in with just kind of running down what the process is. Unlicensed complaints come in the exact same way that a regular complaint would come in. So folks call the 1-800-IN-HARM number. It goes into intake, and then at intake, then they're screening it. So one thing that they're doing is they're looking to see if it's an actual licensed childcare, if it's in their system, has there been other complaints that come in, and then they're screening that to us. There's another component there that I'll go back and talk about is if it is an unlicensed care complaint as well as an LDCPS complaint. So what that means is that in the intake, in the complaint, it came in and said that somebody's providing unlicensed care, or it could possibly be unlicensed care, and then you have abuse and neglect that has taken place, or alleged abuse and neglect. So when it comes into intake, then it kicks over to us. We comes to our desk. We have a certain amount of time that we need to deal with it. It's the exact same as a regular complaint. We have, I think, 9 hours to respond to it, which is basically a day. And then we have 5 days until we need to go out and do the visit. So pre-COVID, we were actually not even going out and doing visits on the first intake that would come in as unlicensed care, right? So what we were doing is we were just taking it. It would come in, we'd send a letter out to the individual asking them to fill out some questions and explain the situation. And then we would go either found it or follow up if there was more questions or if they didn't fill it out. Now our practice is that we're treating all these complaints like a normal complaint. We need to go knock on the door within 5 days and see if there's actual unlicensed childcare going on. That was a decision that we had made based on some feedback that we've gotten back from some folks. There was also a situation with a child that passed away in an unlicensed care setting, and the parents had shared with us that they wish that one thing that the department had done more, and I had to have the difficult conversation that we didn't have any authority over that situation because they weren't licensed. But after we had gone through our process and procedure, they felt like just sending out a letter wasn't enough. And so we took that feedback and we actually changed our practice so that we're going out and knocking on folks' door and finding out what's going on if there is unlicensed care going on. And I think that's a really good step for us to take. The other thing that I will say is that we're not going looking for these, right? We're not getting on the internet and going to Facebook or Craigslist or different services and searching for these. We're only taking the ones that are coming to our door as an intake, right? So somebody in the community gets word that somebody's doing unlicensed care, and they make a report and it comes to us. I would love to be in the spot where we could actually go searching for these folks, getting on Facebook, getting on Craigslist and looking at it's just we don't have enough staff to do that. Some staff have started doing that, during slow times in the past, and it almost gets overwhelming. So it is a problem. Unlicensed care is a problem in Washington State. I'll say it out loud, right? And I think that during COVID, we actually created more of it because there was less of us going out into the field, and parents got really creative of childcare. So I'll just say that. So once it comes in, we have 5 days to go out. We'll go out and we'll knock on the door. And then it's really a conversation with that individual. And it depends on if we're talking, a lot of these are family homes, right? Assume that it's family homes. Every once in a while, we do get a center situation, right? Where are they providing some sort of service, or are they providing childcare, right? Where you get, the big example is like karate, but that then turns into, it's an all-day affair, right? So I'm taking my child there for karate lessons, but it happens to be 5-6 hours, right? We have stumbled into those situations, and that's just people trying to get around, not being licensed is what it is. So one thing that we do is we do a cross check. If it isn't a family, friends, and neighbor provider with us, we can look in the system already, because sometimes we get those, right? A neighbor calls in a complaint saying the person across the street has a bunch of kids coming and going and they're not licensed, right? And so we figured out real quick that that's some of our FFN folks that are providing childcare, and is what it is. So we're able to look into those. Once we get out and we hand deliver the unlicensed provider letter that states basically, here's the law, this is what states what exempt care is, you know, it gives them a section where they can write out what actually is going on. Once that takes place, you know, it's really a conversation. In a lot of situations, people go, I had no idea I needed to be licensed. And then the conversation turns to like, this is a complaint versus, well, this is how you become licensed, right? And did you know that there's an avenue to do this, and you can actually have, you know, business, and, you know, it shifts really quick and almost becomes that we're recruiting folks then at that point, versus I got you, and, you know, stop doing this and coming in with a hammer. There are situations where we have to be that, right? So we have some folks that have been licensed, have lost their license, and continue to provide childcare. And those are kind of the frequent flyers that we have. And those are the more cases where we take that hard approach of, hey, this is against the law. You can't be doing this. And if you keep doing it, then, you know, we're going to take the next actions to kind of escalate it. So what does that mean if we're going to escalate it? So one thing that we can do is we can do a cease and desist, which is basically saying, stop doing this, which is not a lot. You know, and this is where I think that we can really have a conversation about, can there be more teeth for the department to really deal with these situations? So we can say, okay, stop doing childcare. The other thing that we can do is that we can do a civil penalties. So we can issue a civil penalties to those providers. But I will tell you this, if they're not in the system and they're not providing care, that is really empty. Now that stays on their record. So if they ever did go to get a license to provide childcare, those civil penalties would be there. If they were providing care for somebody in their family, like say it's elderly care, you know, that's going to show up with the state that they have the civil penalties sitting there. So it is something. It's not that it's not anything. The other thing that I will tell you is sometimes we get in situations with providers that we've written quite a bit of civil penalties. And one of the negotiations is that, hey, if you become licensed and you start doing this correct way, then we'll cut your civil penalties in half, or we'll, you know, erase your civil penalties if you become licensed. So we kind of use it as a negotiation for them to kind of, and a lot of times that works out where we're adding a provider versus, you know, doing something else. So once we have the information, once we've had the conversation and we know that either they're unlicensed, one, we're going to try and get them licensed. The other thing is we're going to inform them about the early learning system and what is out there. And maybe it's that not that they want to provide childcare in their home, but maybe it's that they want to become an assistant at a child care or something like that. So what we're really trying to do is recruit them at that point, and explain to them, you know, what the law is. I will tell you, there is a ton of myths out there about the law, right? I can provide childcare if it's only one family, if there's only 3 kids, you know, only certain days of the month, all these kind of myths are out there. They're myths, right? It's pretty clear that, you know, based on the age of the child, based on 4 hours, it's very clear. The RCW has written it out that you have to be licensed in Washington State. There's small few areas of exemption, but there's not a lot of wiggle room in Washington State. I will tell you this, we need to do a better job of marketing licensed child care. right? There's a lot of parents that I talk to after we've said, hey, you can't provide childcare anymore. Then they pick up the phone and they get mad and they're like, hey, where am I going to find childcare that cheap, right? Because that's usually what it is. They're undercutting what is out, what all you folks are charging, right? And that's one of the big issues. Susan, do you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, so you specifically mentioned like, the karate associations or whatever, and I wanted to ask, well, what was the outcome? Because like right now I'm looking at the Washington Karate Association website. They don't say anything about being licensed. They run after-school programs from 2 to 6 p.m. They provide transportation to select Seattle public schools. They do summer camps, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. For the entirety of the summer. And although this summer it looks like they only did it for a few weeks, but I mean, what was the outcome? Did they give the rationale that was good enough to say they didn't need to be licensed? Because I mean, I don't know, to me, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck.
Yeah, no, we actually got into in some cases, and I'm not about the place that you're looking at, but there has been some cases where we have battled and civil penalties have gotten up to, $50,000. We've gotten the city involved. If it is a place that is just refusing to become licensed and we feel like kids aren't safe, then we're going to pursue it to the most that we can. This is where I get to the point of we don't have any teeth, right? So we can do all that stuff, but it is a misdemeanor in Washington state, right, to provide unlicensed childcare. The problem with that is you have to get law enforcement to be able to, go out, and then you have to get the prosecutor on board that they're going to actually charge them, right? So bigger law enforcement, bigger agencies are not going to move on this. We've had a little bit of luck in some smaller communities to be able to get law enforcement on board and actually file some, charges. And then we ended up going to court, and then we're saying, yeah, this is what's going on. And the judge is right on board saying, hey, you can't do this anymore. But it is difficult to get to that point. We need something more. One, what I would like is to be able to have more folks to look into these, and then two, some sort of teeth to be able to really do something about it. Instead of trying to get the prosecutor on board, and that could be different in each community. So we have had some success, not a lot, to be honest, Susan.
Thank you.
Yeah. So once we have the information, once we've gone out and done gathered the information from the complaint, it's very similar to a regular complaint. The licensor goes back, staffs it with the supervisor, then closes it, then it's reviewed. And then a letter goes out to that individual. One, it's either going to say, it was founded, or it's going to say, no, you can keep doing what you're doing, basically. And so we are allowing folks to dispute that if there's a case, because what we found is that we would go found it on some of these. And then, then they're coming back and saying, oh, no, I needed to give you this information and this, and it could have been overturned. So we're giving folks another chance to come to us and say, hey, no, I'm not providing care. This is what is actually going on. It's, whatever it could be. The other thing is it gives us another chance to talk to them about being licensed as well, is what it does. So if it's a scenario where, I don't know, off the top of my head, it's a situation where you have one person caring for somebody, once a week. It's kind of a situation where they're dropping them off for an hour and a half or something, right? It gives us another chance to have a conversation with that individual about what licensed care is, and that kind of thing is what it does. So when it comes to the LDCPS cases, okay, so comes in, and there is abuse and neglect, right? So maybe a child has been injured or something. We will go out with the LDCPS investigator. So it screens in, there's a conversation. When we go out with them, we are still only looking to see if it is unlicensed childcare or not. That is our role. LDCPS is looking at if there is abuse and neglect. Okay, two separate, very similar to how we do our childcare complaints, but we're not looking at if they're out of violation or anything. We're only looking at if it's childcare. So you could have a situation where the two of us go out to look to see if there's unlicensed care going on, and then we find out this is not unlicensed care, and then all of a sudden it shifts because then LDCPS doesn't have jurisdiction anymore, and then it gets kicked to regular CPS at that point. The other thing that could happen is that we go out and then we find out that there's no abuse and neglect, and it is unlicensed care, and then we would proceed in that manner of dealing with it and stating, okay, this is unlicensed care, this is how you can become licensed, you know, or you need to stop what you're doing. So I'm going to pause for a second to see if folks have questions or comments.
Well, this is
You want-
Susan. Oh, sorry, go you.
Sorry, Susan. I just want to find out, I know you're talking about people that are providing childcare. My question is, are you going to have like a translator for people who doesn't speak English, or you have to have that information on? The other question that I know is that, what I remember is that you mentioned there are some providers in the past, they have their license, but for some of the reasons they lost their license. They know the policy, they know what is going on. So, and probably because they lost their license because they require more high school diploma, and in the college and the community, they don't provide the language so they can continue their high school diploma. How can you support those providers?
Let me answer your first question with if we need somebody to translate. So these are very complicated complaints, and a lot of times we're not getting the full story, right? So you might go out and then it's all of a sudden, okay, I need an interpreter translator to be able to do this. So then you're going to have to get on the phone and get that individual on the phone, or schedule to go out a different time is what's going to happen, right? The other thing that happens with these, so not even, not knowing, do they speak English or not, but sometimes we don't get the address, right? We'll get a partial address, we'll get a block and the color of the house. We don't get a lot of information sometimes with these. So these are complicated and they take time to kind of dig in and really unravel or unfold it. When it comes to if we're going to stumble on somebody that gave up their license because of qualification, we would figure out how to help them to get those qualifications and become licensed again is what we would do. That would be our approach. The only ones that we really go after, and I don't even really want to say that, but are the ones that we pursue are the folks that know, like we've revoked their license, right? And they're still operating. Those are the folks that we are going after, that we truly want to shut down, because there's a reason why they shouldn't be providing care, right? Kids aren't safe. If it's a situation where somebody's, because of their education background, we're going to want to work with them to get them licensed again is what we're going to want to do.
Okay, yeah, because I'm asking you because I have a lot of families, they come and they say, hey, how much do you charge? And I go, well, I charge what the state pay. They say, ugh. Yep. And they want to go to other because both parents work and it's really hard for them to qualify. So and I know there's some providers, they're really good unlicensed people. They care about the kids and they follow the policies, but I know that they have to follow the law and follow what everyone is doing. So that's all. Thank you.
Well, and I look at it this way. I look at it as it's very unfair that we make you all, follow the regulations that you have to follow, right? And do everything that you're supposed to do, but then somebody down the block doesn't have to do that, and then they can charge less, right?
True.
I,
That's true.
I really don't think it's fair. Now, I wish we had a ton of people to be able to go look into all of these. And a big old campaign to say, this is why licensed childcare is important. This is why when that gal advertised, I'm licensed, you know, why it's important. First off, right out of the bat, background checks, right? Like, you know, if you're taking your child somewhere else, there's no background checks. So,
You know what, Travis, now that you mentioned that, is really good information what you given us to us right now, but it will be really good if you come to the community, like on the radio, on the Spanish, and talk about it, kind of like half an hour, 20 minutes, and once a week or something. Hey guys, this is the reason why you have to make sure your child goes under a licensed childcare. The difference about this, I think having that information on the radio in the community, there are parents who doesn't know, there will is almost like an open eye, like, oh, wow, I did not know that, but okay.
Yep, I agree with you 100%.
Hopefully you can do that in the future.
Look, Gloria, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Travis. It's also a comment in supporting what Lucas Suarez mentioned. My concern is a little bit more about qualifications, because it's a lot of, let's talk about the Latino community, okay? Because I'm part of this. They have a lot of ex-providers that they have the heart to work with children. They had the patience and experience, but only because they didn't have a high school diploma, they had to let their license go. Mm-hmm. Or we have a lot of people, like they love to work with children, so they want to be part of the staff or for all daycare, so open child care, but because the GD requirement or the high school diploma requirement, they stop them to come to this professional career. And I hear a lot of families wanting to do this because that is one obstacle, the high school diploma, and hiring staff, high school diploma and GD. And my concern or comment is why we don't give the opportunity to these people who really want to be in this field and make the equivalency for staff trainings and instead of requesting a high school diploma or GD, because we're having a hard time right now to hire staff because of the requirements. And I think if we're requesting them to go to get your GD or your high school diploma, most of the classes are in English. They don't speak much English. And they're going to spend how many months or weeks to get that credential, but families just want to go right away and make money to survive. And I think this is a big hole in here. Like we need to do something else to accepting more people. And yes, we need to be trained and we have to have requirements, but something like they really help them to work with children, like have 20 hours of stars plus the 30 hours, okay? Or make an agreement after passing all the required training except the GD or the high school diploma if they don't have it. But make a contract, or we can make a contract with them like during the 12 months, you are in a commitment to have your your EC, or at least half of the EC, the child certificate, because that is going to help them to do better work with children. But going to the school for the high school diploma, they make a lot of frustration in them and they give up. I don't know how we can do better to support these people. They aren't there. They want to be in this field, but that is an obstacle. And what I say in this, because it's a lot of 30 years old, 35, 40 years old Latino ladies who really love working with children, but they had the high school diploma from Mexico, Latin America. And when they come to this country, they didn't show they're going to need those documents and they forget the documents, and they're 15 to 20 years later, they find out like they can open a business or continue with their education. And they went and look for those papers and those papers don't exist anymore. And how they prove like they have that education. They have to start new, and that is hard. How we can support them? I in a commitment to board and support them, and I've been seeing these obstacles because I working for Imagine Institute and the Interns Mentors Program, and I find all these obstacles in there. How can
Yeah. Yeah, I think we need to look at qualifications. I think we're at a point where we need to look at qualifications. There's a work shortage out there, and so we're gonna have to look at qualifications. Because I agree with you. If there's folks that want to work in this field, we need to figure out a way to get them into the field of working, because we can't be turning people away right now. We can't. There's just not enough people, and if there's people out there that want to take care of kids, then we need to figure out a way to make it happen. And so I think that's what you're going to see from the department. I mean, we're going to have to do something, and I think this group should be recommending that as well.
Thank you,
Julie. What?
You've always said that, though, that the PD is too much.
Yeah.
So, I mean, good to hear that you think there might be a shift. I hope.
I hope too. I mean, I hope, I think that definitely we need, hearing from you folks what you're dealing with, because I'm talking to you all like on a daily basis, right? So I'm hearing it firsthand, but and I'm passing that along, and Judy Bunkelman and I are having some conversations behind the scenes and asking to have some meetings and stuff. So we're pushing from our side is what I'm saying.
That's good to hear. So I wanted to bring up a couple of things. One of the things this group is recommending is that if there's unlicensed care that needs to be reported, that it shouldn't have to go through end harm. I've had, as I put in the chat, I put an example in the chat of a place that's in my town that's been open as long as I have, over 20 years. And I have interviewed over the years many of their previous employees. So I know what has been going on, from using the whole, we only do either AM or PM sessions, and then they let the kids stay for both. But I tell families, I tell those ex-employees, you need to call and report. But the problem is families don't want to call CPS, even if it's not about themselves. It's an uncomfortable connection that they don't want to make. And I understand that. So I hope that that recommendation will be taken to heart, and that there'll be a separate way to report that in the future. I think there's a huge difference between the way an unlicensed care is treated versus a provider that decides to drop their license. Not a provider that was shut down, but let's say you only have a couple of subsidy kids and then they're leaving for kindergarten or whatever, aging out of the program, and you just go, I'm just not going to be licensed anymore. I think there's a huge difference in how that would be handled. And it's not okay. Like I should be able to, if I wanted to go unlicensed and tell you that I'm only open from 9 to noon every day, I would want you to pursue those other folks with as much vigor as you would pursue me.
Yeah, first off, I agree with you, and I probably skipped over it a little bit, but when that intake comes in, and I agree with the in harm, it makes sense. When the intake actually comes to us, we're looking in the system, right? So we're looking in our system to see, have they ever been licensed or anything? And those folks are treated differently, right? So it's not just somebody that just handed in their license and now they're provided. We're going to look at them like, hey, this is against the law. So we're going to go into that a little bit versus just going to somebody that doesn't know the child care system at all. We're going to handle those and look at those two completely different. In fact, if the person who handed in their license is watching kids, that's a no-brain founded unlicensed care, right? Because they know the law, because they were licensed at one point. They knew that they needed to be licensed in providing care. So
but I'm talking about the places that have been warned, have been turned in. They do know the law. They're just ignoring it.
And the thing that I would say is, We need the teeth to do something with it. And I have been from the day that Ross came to the department, I have been beating this drum. I've talked to Frank about it. You know, it just is one of those things that can't get any traction because it's an after the fact kind of thing. But I think that if we were forcing kids into licensed childcare, that would be an area that, you all would be like, yeah, this is exactly what needs to be happening, right? You would support that. Everybody across, nobody would not support that. So.
Okay, so you still don't really have the teeth.
We don't have the teeth. That's,
okay.
We need the teeth is what we need.
Okay.
I would love to have one step further. I would love to have a separate group that looks at these, not licensors, right? Like actually complaint specialists that would look into this stuff, but that's what they do. They go and dig up stuff and then they go out and they specialize in complaint investigations is the thing.
Yeah, one last thing. I know that you came to, I think it was this group with a CPS guy.
Yes.
Ron. Okay, thank you. Yeah. And we talked about what happens when there's a CPS investigation. And there were a lot of questions. And there was I think there was a lot of, we'll get back to you. So I'm hopeful at the next provider supports meeting in October that there will be representation from licensing division like yourself, and then also from the CPS licensing division, someone like Ron, and then someone that can answer those questions instead of saying, we'll get back to you, maybe Luba or someone. And so I just want to put that plug out there.
Okay, I'll make a note of it.
Thank you.
Laura, you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to mention a couple things. One, I want to know if self-reports need to be funneled through NHARM, because I had a child that broke their arm, right? And so I called licensing, which we used to call licensing years ago, right? And the licensor would take the report, but it was referred to NHARM, so I had to, self-report on myself, which is fine, I guess. I mean, but it's kind of weird to be calling CPS to make a report on something that's not abuse and neglect, right? So I did that, and I'll be honest with you, I'd almost prefer a CPS investigation sometimes over licensing, and I'm not trying to be rude by saying that, but I feel like licensing sometimes tries to make things fit somehow, right? So they came out, it got funneled through licensing, they came out, did their check, right? Looked at that ground cover, checked, because I had a child fall off a small climber, a very small climber. It was like a freak accident. I've never had any injury in 20 some years. I don't know if they look at our history, right? But they came out, and licensing is always pleasant. I'm not complaining about the licensors. I'm just, the process as a provider is a little strenuous because they came out, they, talked with us. The parent was not upset. They kept their child with us, right? But they couldn't find anything wrong. So then they, have to leave it open while they finish up. And then they called me and said, oh, well, when did you get the wood chips, right? And I'm like, well, they were there when you came out. Well, do you have a receipt for those? It's like I had to prove that, that I didn't just add wood chips or something, right? So, which it came out not valid. I said, and the end result was fine. It's just, I'm wondering if those do, how did that change where we have to call those through NHARM and black our own record up? I guess I'm wondering.
Yeah, so let me talk about the NHARM line first, because it's one way to capture all of the complaints, right? So it's a call center is what it is. So there's people sitting there, and you can call anytime and call in. So it was a way to capture it. It's before my time. The decision was made. It's also, when we were, now this is way back in the day when we were DSHS, right? And we we're all one agency, you know, it was an easy way to say, oh, we'll just add this childcare component to it. And the reason being is that sometimes those childcare complaints are also CPS, right? I'm hearing what you're all saying about the end harm, and you know, if there was another way to do it. I will tell you this, we have added some steps to our practice when we're looking at these complaints, and that if they can be screened out, then we're going to take that option and screen them out. But that's at the supervisor level, right? It has to staff with the supervisor, and then that's screened out is what happens. So there is a way to do that. I think in your scenario of what you're describing is that they kind of had to go through the motions to get to the point, and you know, obviously they probably interviewed the parent as well, and that's why it was, you know, unfounded, you know. And sometimes it's better to have that on your record than just a screen out, right? Because then there's no doubt.
Well, and I agree with you, but it's like first they said that they were looking at supervision, right? And then I'm like, you know, so I gave the teacher statement, and I, you know, kind of said like, there's no lack of supervision like in this. And so then they, you know, double checked the wood chips, and then I had to give her, you know, it's just like, holy moly, it's almost like you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent, I guess, you know, to some extent. So anyways, that's all. I just wonder if there is a different process that feels a little less invasive.
I also have had this conversation with folks, right? Licensors, their specialty is not doing investigations and complaint inspections, right? They're licensors. You know, a lot of them come from the early learning field, and they look with that lens, where some folks are better at doing the complaint investigations. Every once in a while, we'll have a staff that comes from CPS. They're amazing with the complaints, right? They nail the complaints, and then we teach them how to do the licensing thing. But it really is a specialty to be able to do investigations. It's where I would like to have almost a special unit to look at these and leave the licensor as the licensor to be your support, your partner, and have a separate, you know, somebody else do those. So, but that's my wish list.
I just thought it was liability purposes, that they have to cover every avenue so that somebody is like, come back on the department or something. I don't know. Anyways.
I will tell you this, some folks struggle with doing investigation.
What it is. I also wanted to talk about the staffing and let you know that, you know, I agree with you on the education component. I've hired somebody with a college degree, and they don't understand when they start with me why they're not left alone in a classroom, right? Like I've got my, but if you have an autistic kid that needs to be, you know, talked to a certain way, redirected a certain way, like it doesn't matter how much education the person has, they don't come with the language component, right? The language component that triggers behaviors, those can only be taught in class. And so I prefer actually green staff that I can train and model them and mold them how I need them to be. And then if they want to go on to school, great. But just from the field, I just tell you that I have the best luck with hiring an 18-year-old and molding them so that way I don't have to reamp all of their wording that they're used to. Because, you know, there's a lot of no's and don'ts, and sometimes, you know, that people are using. And if they've been a long-time teacher teaching that way, it's hard to change old behavior more, you know, more than just creating your own good behavior from the start. So just my little note to you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Susan, you have a question?
Yeah, I actually, for me, you know, rather than talking about specific incidences or situations, based on the explanation you offered, Travis, it causes me great concern to know that really there is discrepancy on how licensed providers are treated. I mean, like we have violations on our investigations, and it still isn't to the place of coaching. It's still punitive or whatever. So there's that part of it. And then it feels like for unlicensed care providers, there's this assumption that they don't know what the laws are, when like I've gone to websites and called providers and said, well, we don't have to be licensed because we do this or this or this. So they're aware of the law. There's no question in my mind about it. But yet when they're doing the same thing we're doing, full day programming, so on and so forth. So I'm very concerned about this idea that DCYF licensors, you don't have any teeth or jurisdiction over unlicensed. There's no method for which people can apply for exemption and prove that they're exempt. So as a licensed provider, we will always have an unfair playing field against us. And so I want to know, what is it we need to do to change that? Because that uneven playing field in terms of, like, others have mentioned, people can charge lower fees. They're probably not even insured to the degree that we are. And so I'm more concerned about what are we going to do about it, not that we can't do anything about it at this point. That's what I want to know.
Yeah. We've talked about doing a statewide register, which you mentioned. I think that would be a good start too. So if you're licensed exempt, you have to apply for it. Some states do that. So then your name goes in a register. And so then, if you are providing childcare, then, it's documented. I think that's also a better way to track our kids too, to get better data of, where kids are going and what's out there. And to get a full, true picture of what the early learning system is, right? Because there's a lot of preschools that are not licensed, right? And we don't know how many are out there, So, Susan, you're asking, what are we going to do? I would love for this group to make some recommendations. I've been pounding the drum. It's just one of those things that we can't make any progress on because it will take bodies to be able to fix this problem, right? We need individuals to start picking up rocks and looking underneath rocks. And then I think we also need an aggressive kind of campaign on licensed childcare. Parents should be fearful that they're not taking their kids to your sites, right? That, because when they drop their kid off at your sites, they know that, okay, everybody has a background check. They have qualifications. They should feel good about, okay, yes, I left my child there. I'm a parent. I wouldn't feel good leaving my child somewhere else that, you don't know who's coming and going inside the house and that kind of thing. So I guess what I'm asking is that, I'd love to partner with this to figure out how we can get some movement here for you all.
I want to make a comment. So I do agree with Susan and with someone that made a comment on the chat. I've heard from people that want to report unlicensed places, they are like, did you see like any neglect or harm or whatever? And they're like, no, then don't worry about it. Just do your thing. So I don't think, like, for us that we're licensed, I don't think that's fair, because we do need to follow the law, like everyone was mentioning and all that, but they know too, and they don't even care. So is there a place or a phone number or someone that we can contact to report these places? Or, sorry, I jumped a little late, so I don't know if you guys talked about this at the beginning of the meeting. And I am in a group of the local childcare provider. So I would want to share this information with them. And I think it would be helpful, like you mentioned, maybe get other options out there, maybe start reporting more. And yeah, because this is not fair. We have to do like a lot of classes, trainings, and having licensors coming over to our places. And we have to be within the ratio, and these unlicensed places have like a lot of kids, and it's just one person or two, and they're neglected. For me, that's neglect. So yeah, I don't think that's fair for the kids. And even if it's cheaper, there's a lot of resources out there for families. It's just a lot easier for them to just leave them in a place that it's not safe for them. So yeah, if you have that information, it would be helpful so that I can share with other providers.
Yeah, currently, and was the conversation earlier as we were talking about end harm. So 1-800 end harm, which is the same line that you call in CPS or if there's abuse, neglect. It's the same. It goes to the same intake person, and then they talk and they fill out the complaint, and then they kick it over to us. Is what takes place.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Other questions or comments?
I just want to share, Travis, that years ago, I remember I tell providers to tell them about the unlicensed. And when they call, they said, you know what, Lupe, they talked to me and they said, why are you worried about it? At least they're having a job and they're earning money. So stop putting fingers on people that are unlicensed. So they say, I'm never going to go back again because I get yelled at for just telling them that there's some neighbors having a childcare over there. So I don't know if all the staff, they understand when someone call and make a complaint or report something, do they have to talk back to them? I tell the provider, do you remember the name? What time do you call? Because then we can call the supervisor and say, at this time I call, and this is the person who told me this. She said, no, but I'm not calling back again. So a lot of providers who have license, they're afraid to call because they don't do anything. So I just want to let you know that.
So one thing that is a really good practice, because I've had to call in a lot of complaints in my career, is that I would always write down, the intake worker will not give you their last name, but you can get their first name is what you can get. And I always wrote down a note, because I'm a mandated reporter. If something happened and I didn't report something, something could happen, right? And so I always would write down that individual's name. So, and you're right. If you have that individual's name and somebody's telling you, oh yeah, don't worry about it, that's inappropriate. They should be taking the information, filing the report, not have an opinion of that. So, yeah.
And it's still confidential because years ago, I tell them, if you call, everything is confidential. The person because they go and do an observation, they will not report who you are. They still do the confidential thing or not?
You can be a confidential referent, right? So
okay.
One thing is that sometimes makes it difficult when we're then looking into it, because we typically call the referent up is probably one of the first things that we do is we're calling the referent to get their story firsthand. In a lot of cases, or if we get the intake that it's a yellow house on the right side, third house down, it's nice to be able to verify some of that information too.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Can you tell me, Travis, if you had a summer school age only program, would that need to be licensed if you didn't accept subsidy?
Seasonal? Is you're running it as a seasonal?
Yeah, just as a summer. I don't have this, but I'm just wanting to know because we have a childcare shortage in Yakima. So I had some emergency waivers. I think those were supposed to go away. Did they go away or not yet? I never heard back from the licensor as to whether they actually went away or they didn't.
Only if folks aren't using them, right? So if you're not,
so you're okay to still use it now.
I would check with your licensor, right? To make sure that it's still in place. The other thing with your question, so if you're going to run a summer program, check with your licensor first, right? And let them know what you're doing so you don't get an unlicensed complaint.
Well, I did, and I don't want to, but I believed I was told that I could do that if it was non-subsidy in the summer. And so I guess I was just kind of wondering, like, I didn't even know such a thing exists. I didn't do it because, I thought these waivers were going, and then I had I had an extra kids that, I understand why some people go to unlicensed care. They don't have anywhere to take their kids. There's a shortage, and what are they supposed to do? They have to sometimes choose between one thing or feeding their family, and it's scary for parents, especially if you're a single parent, right? So I just was wondering if you knew if those waivers went away. Okay, I'll check with the licensor, I guess. So I thought they were ending.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I will tell you this, when you're talking about the seasonal camp stuff, what we had some people doing, they were doing unlicensed care, right? So I'll do a seasonal camp for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever. And then we'll take 1 week break and then we'll come right back. Oh, and they're all the same kids, right? And there's no new enrollment form. It was a bunch of things. So there's people that everybody's been saying the whole time. There's people that know, they go online and they read the paperwork and they find a way around the system is what they do. And those are the people that we really want, to stop doing childcare, unlicensed childcare.
Has the department considered at all trying to have any requirements in place for the under 5 hour a day crowd? Because I think it's weird. They don't have to have background checks. They don't have to have CPR, nothing.
Julie, there is a huge history there. And it's before my time of when that was written in. There's been a couple times where we've looked at it and there's major pushback. I have been saying the whole time, I would like those folks to be licensed, because of that reason. Background checks, just the whole thing. Why are kids safe 4 hours, in that program versus your program? So I'm on board with you on that. It doesn't make sense, but that law was in place way before me. I know that people have kind of advocated to get rid of it or alter it, and there was major pushback. But
it's interesting because I know that there's good preschool programs out there. Yeah. There's one at the high school, and I'm sure they do a good job, but that doesn't stop the guy down the street that is on the sex offender registry from putting a sign in his yard that says preschool, and nobody's ever going to know unless typically when they have to report in their case manager or whatever you call it, they don't go to their house every time. They check in the guy's office. So
you bring up
nobody would know.
There's actually a system behind the scenes that works that cross-references where sex offenders live and where child cares are, right?
Right.
What happens is every once in a while, a sex offender will register at a child care and we will get notice then to go out and check on it.
Yeah, no, I was just talking about a guy down the street putting a sign in his yard that just says unlicensed preschool. Well, it wouldn't say unlicensed, but
that's even more reason for them to be licensed because they show up in the system, right? If you're not in the system, you don't show up, you can do whatever. Yeah.
Who was the pushback by the way?
I don't know. It was external. It's not internal. It's not with DCYF. And it was DEL when, we were still DEL. It was back in the day.
I think that would be good information to have, don't you?
Yeah, you would think everybody would support anybody watching a child for an hour being like, yeah, you should have a background check.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still really concerned about this, Travis. I feel like we do need to have a plan or a next steps in place because, first of all, it sounds like it's a bigger picture problem because licensing regulations are one of the reasons people don't want to be licensed because they're overly burdensome in some areas. The safety part, I get the health and safety. We want to be very, diligent in that regard. But so I think we need to start putting a real plan together for how we actually literally solve the licensing overregulation doesn't need to be there. And then, so that we could, because if we don't address this part of the playing field, when you say to someone, oh, well, you should get licensed because it's so great, they're going to go, no, I'm not going to do that because all of the things that we know about. So all this does for me is open up a whole nother set of concerns and worries, and the Pandora's box is bigger now. And I am not going to be satisfied with saying this is the way it is. We have to do something, and we have to solve these problems because the childcare sector is at risk. The whole sector is at risk. And we don't have the time to wait. So I don't want to sound like, the negative Nancy or whatever, but I've been doing this work for over 30 years. Kids Co plays by the rules. I remember having a conversation with a licensor who literally was like putting her hand in the hot water and saying, oh, the temperature of your hot water is too hot. We're housed in a school. I'm like, first of all, your hand isn't a thermometer and we're in a school and you just ding Kids Co. I feel like you have some quota to like ding people and programs that will fix it. So you can say, look, all of the compliance problems I've identified were fixed because you go to a place like Kids Co. or Julie's programs or and then we'll turn around and solve these problems. But then when it comes to unlicensed care, we'll say, well, we don't have any teeth, we can't do anything about it's unacceptable, period, and it has to be dealt with. I'm not sure what the next steps are, but I can't imagine that there's anyone on this call that doesn't agree with what I just said.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I've been dealing with this for years, right? And it's why I've been trying to say we need to do something about this. It will take an RCW change, I believe, because then that will give us then the teeth to be able to do something, or somebody the teeth, right? It doesn't even need to be us, right? Give it to law enforcement or something, or but I think that, yes, I agree. I agree that those are twofold, right? Like if you're going to, we need to look at the barriers. That is what this group is, to look at licensing, right? Then you have to look at the other side of it because they don't play by those same rules and their overhead is not the same. And you can go on, and that isn't fair. I don't think that's been fair the whole time. And, we would have licensors that would be like, really advocated about this, right? Like they're advocating, like, I saw this online, we need to do this, we need to do this, we do this. And we run all the way down to that point where we're going to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor's going, I got 3 murders I'm dealing with, right? And it's like, so of course they're not going to charge them with
But I mean, most of what we're talking about here for unlicensed care is not like a felony.
No.
It's sort of like misdemeanors. I think the way it's set up is totally overkill in that regard too. If the law says you have to be licensed if you're doing X, Y, and Z, and people are breaking the law, why isn't there any teeth? That is the part I don't understand. But now I'm hearing that it's because when someone's breaking the law, DCYF steps out of the picture and law enforcement and the legal system steps in.
No, we're trying to pull them in, right? Like we're saying, here's a stack of papers. We've documented, these are the kids that are coming and going, and we have all this information, and we're handing it over to them to do something. And they're just not willing to do anything.
I feel like you told me at one point about something that Texas did, and they have teeth.
Yes.
Can you go into that?
Yeah. So this is kind of my wish list is that Texas actually created their own unit. And what happened is there was an unlicensed, there was a gal that was providing unlicensed care. Her apartment or duplex caught fire, and a bunch of kids died, right? And then so Texas, from that, they were able to come up with a whole unit that then deals with these unlicensed complaints. So they go out, and I mean, I think even to the point that they can get prosecutors involved. It gave them quite a bit of authority to deal with these. Now, I think that is probably overkill. Like we don't need to, make, deputies out of folks and have them go out and do all. But I think that there needs to be something in the law that if you do this X number of times, right, and there's documentation, it should be pretty easy to bring some sort of case against somebody, and just make it easier to shut them down so that they're not providing that. I mean, and I don't know, that's where I need other people's help of a way to deal with these folks, so yeah. So Texas is a good example. There's other states that have this kind of model or similar, so there's other people that have figured out how to do this. I'm just hoping that we never have the situation where we have the fire where then we're forced to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. These are the kind of things that keep me awake at night, right? This is because we have a ton of these out there. I know we do, and I'll be the first one to admit that we've kind of created some of this because of the pandemic, because folks got really creative.
But if every program had to register and prove that they were, qualified to be exempt, then you could go out there and say, sorry, you have to be licensed. And I know there's down the road stuff, but I mean, this is not right.
Yeah, you either have to be licensed or on the register, right? Or that you're exempt, something like that.
Oh, God.
Do you guys keep a list of license exempt places?
No.
Do they don't have to
No.
request license exempt?
No, they don't. See, that's
Okay.
that's kind of the direction I would want to go. And I think then it would give us a bigger picture of what the childcare system is too, right? Because you're going to see, we'll be able to then run, this is how many preschools there are, right? This is how many preschools are in your area, kind of, it would be good data to have also.
And you could require background checks.
We have some,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, we have some license exempt centers that offer Head Start and ECAP in a part-day classroom, 3.5, anywhere from 3 to 4 hours a day. But however, we're required to be involved in early achievers and merit, and we have to have there's lots of regulations. But one of the things, I actually met with Travis over this, because at one point there was the recommendation that they all be licensed, but a lot of the Head Start and ECAP centers have been in churches historically, and very, very difficult, and elementary schools, very difficult to get licensed due to things within the building, like there's no sprinklers in some of the churches, and you'd have to cost, $500,000 to put sprinklers throughout the entire building, or in elementary schools that don't have sinks in every classroom and things like that become a challenge, especially for these programs. But we are registered, and so I don't understand why like a church daycare not daycare, but a church preschool that operates 3 hours a day wouldn't be on some type of a registry as well.
Yeah.
You see, and that serves like a good example of the kind of overregulation, right? like if a sprinkler system is okay, for a school not to have, then why wouldn't it be okay for a childcare center with 60 kids, right? So that way they could be licensed. There's a lot of stipulations that prevent people from getting licensed that I think if we could somehow go back to instead of best practice incorporated in the WACs or early achievers incorporated in, we had like health and safety for licensing, and then those that go above and beyond are tracked in the system and rated, right? Then at least we could have providers licensed and meeting, the health and safety components without having to do everything in one ball.
Yeah.
I think this might be a good time to transition and maybe go into breakout rooms and work on some recommendations. Travis, do you have anything else you want to say before?
I don't. I appreciate the conversation. I think that to solve this problem, we're going to need your folks' help doing it, right? And so make recommendations, so that we can figure this problem out. Because again, I don't think it's fair that we have you guys jumping through all kinds of hoops and the person down the street puts a sign in their front yard and charges, $10 less, and that's your competition. I don't think that's fair. So I'll leave it at that.
Great.
So, for all of you providers, I just put the question that you're going to be working on in the chat. Based on today's conversation, what key recommendations would you pose to the agency regarding unlicensed care? Before we send you into your breakout rooms, do you have any final questions or anything for Travis? Anything that you need to make some recommendations?
No.
Be thinking about to be more in the community. So more, and I
hear-
go with that because trust me, radios, usually English, Spanish, salami, Japanese, Russia, a lot of people will benefit with all this information that you talk about. And then parents will understand what the difference about licensed and unlicensed, what are the procedures, the steps, and all the what we have to do. And the most important thing is about the safety of their own kids. So I think having that in the community, it will be a huge success for everyone, not only for the children, for providers, and for everyone. So that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. Definitely add that to the Jamboard in your group, Lupita. All right, Jessica just put the link to the Jamboard in the chat. Just a reminder, it works better on Google Chrome. If for some reason you can't access the Jamboard, you can feel free to email your recommendations to our email address. I'll drop that in the chat now. And then Jessica is going to send you guys off into breakout rooms for about 20 minutes. I was too late with my email address. Gloria, Sherry, and Kick's Corner, did you guys see an invitation to join a breakout room? Sherry,
Can you
just
say me that
joined.
again, please?
Yeah, you should get an invitation, like it comes at the bottom of your screen saying something like you're being sent to breakout room 2. Did you see that pop up?
Yes, I did, but I was finishing a chat message and I put no now.
Okay. Does that work? Did you get an invitation? Another one? Did anything pop up for you, Gloria? Or not yet?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of what we have talked about relates to overregulation of providers. It's one of the big deterrents for people that are not licensed. They don't want to become licensed because of the massive document that is the WACs and the overregulation. And so I don't feel like this group is going to be able to dive deep into the WACs. It's huge. We've touched on a few things in some of our recommendations, but I would love for this group to recommend that more work happen, that another group be formed instead of doing another round of NRM, which we know they did NRM back in like 2018 or something, but there should be a group that is able to look at petitions for changes to the WAC. They should be able to go through the WAC and recommend a whole list of things that need to be eliminated from or tweaked to make it more feasible.
Yeah, do you think that would kind of tie into like I keep saying foster parents, a child care provider's rights and responsibilities document? Or
I
are
mean,
you talking
that
about a
could be,
different
that
group
could be
or
created
different?
there, but that is different. I think Nancy had a really good example of when she said, you know, they're only showing up to unlicensed care just to like look inside and make sure everybody's safe, and then they're leaving, whereas they'll stop in your place and say there's a crack in the formica, or there's chipped paint on your shelf or something like that, and you have X number of days to correct it. And it shouldn't be, and you know, even those little couches, right, that we buy for the kids, if the wipeable, or the surface that makes it, what's anti-moisture or something, the surface gets a little crack in it, as they do pretty quickly because the kids are all over them, you have to get rid of it. I mean, come on. A lot of this is so overregulated and so costly.
Can we use
And that is
oops, sorry.
No,
I was
go
just going
ahead,
to follow
Susan.
up with Julie to say, you know, like if it's when an unlicensed program is reported and they go and say that it's safe, you know, but no one's saying, but are they background checked? You know, what level of insurance do you know, there's got to be somewhere between that and the regulations that exist now, because that's not safe for kids, even though it appears safe. It's also not fair that we get dinged for cracked formica and we have to fix it in 30 days. And you know how hard it is to replace a square of like vinyl tile or anything like that? Sometimes you have to do whole sections of floor just to get to that one piece because of color mat, you know, you don't want it to look bad or whatever. There is a lot that needs to be done. And I think Julie's point about the group focused on that, I mean, there's what happens in reality for us. It's like it's just easy to ding us because we're licensed, and like maybe if we had been smarter we just wouldn't have been licensed, but we didn't go that route because we wanted to follow the rules. And by following the rules we are treated in a punitive manner. We have to fix this. And so Julie's right, we need to get this going fast.
Thanks, Susan. Yeah, we're hoping one of our next conversations, probably not the next meeting, but potentially the following one, we'll have kind of a listening session with licensing on overregulation. So I think those things could be brought up there too. But you guys bring up some really great points. I know we are getting close to 8 o'clock. So does anybody else have anything that they want to share with the larger group before we do our final
I have one request.
And
if we're going to have licensing come and discuss overregulation, can you also invite Tyler Farmer? Because he's the one that shared with us on one of the meetings that the process of going through the WACs like NRM, NRM isn't required anymore now that we have like provider supports and the PEG group. But he's the one that shared how regular the WACs are supposed to be looked through. And we were all, I think, jaws on the floor when we heard it's actually overdue.
Yeah, we will ask for Tyler to be present for that conversation. I can't guarantee it, but I will note that and we will ask.
Thanks.
My group asked me to share our recommendations. So one thing that we thought was that there should be consequences for unlicensed care, and somebody should be given the power to enforce those. Sounds like there's nobody with power. Second of all, we thought that licensing requirements also need to be reduced to minimum licensing requirements like they were before. And that would help more people to want to become licensed instead of just skipping the licensing process. We thought also that there could be some support for providers through the licensing process, such as early achiever coaches or some avenue for them. And that the community need to be informed of the benefits of licensed care versus unlicensed care.
Great, thank you, Laura. And if anybody has anything else that they, you know, if later tonight or tomorrow you think of something that you're like, man, I wish I would have put that on the Jamboard, we will leave it open for a couple of days. So any additional recommendations that you think of, please feel free to add them. And we'll also send out that link with the follow-up email as well. So if you guys want to, Jessica just put the Mentimeter link in the chat. This also works best with Google Chrome if you want to click on that, or you can use a smartphone and go to menti.com and enter the code at the top of the page that's shared right now. And if you have any feedback or recommendations for how we should do things differently, feel free to share those with us as well. I'm going to put the community engagement email in the chat one more time. And again, I put this in the chat and I received a few emails, so thank you. But if there's anybody here who is not getting the emails for this group and wants to be on our distribution list, please send us your email and we'll be sure to add you. Or if you know someone else who wants to be added, definitely let us know about that as well.
Do you guys have a sense what time of day you're actually getting more attendance?
We could go back and look, but I would say it's pretty even between the morning and afternoon sessions, and then the evening sessions we're not quite getting as many.
Yeah, I was leaning towards morning, Julie, but
morning.
Yeah, we'd have to go back and look because it really varies. But we could go see.
I think my only
This
feedback
is our last. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, providers are really tired right now. And with the last round of COVID that's gone out and so on. So I think that, evenings are rest and recovery time for many of us. And I don't know if you noticed, but I'm actually in recovery from COVID myself. And makes it for a long day. And I really need to not be working, but I thought this was important. So I continued to work.
Oh, I didn't know
we
you had
appreciate you being
COVID.
here, Susan, and I hope that you're recovering well.
I mean, it hasn't been that bad. Yeah, I took the plunge and we took a little 3-day vacation to Victoria and we went on the Clipper. And I wore my mask and stuff, but that was the only place I can think that I got it, because literally on Saturday was when we went, and by Wednesday I tested positive.
Wow.
So I guess it doesn't pay to go anywhere. But at any rate, not just because of me I'm just saying that we're all putting in really long days. It's summer programs right now, so it's full day programming for school age, and preschool is always full day. So I think that's something to consider when we're having these evening things, because if you think about it from a conditional standpoint, we've been doing this COVID stuff for a long time and people are tired, that's all.
I've really pushed for there to be
Yeah.
some evening ones because family home providers can't do the daytime ones. They often don't have an assistant and they just are busy, but it hasn't had an impact in, well, our attendance has declined, so.
Well, I think the reason is that some of the providers might be afraid to, because they think they don't understand really good English, and that might be one of the reasons why. But who knows? And I agree with you guys too. I'm really tired and I have my kids with me right now, but hey, I can do this once in a while. I turn the camera on, and or sometimes when they're hungry, I eat something really quick. So yeah, I really appreciate the time that you guys provide so I can attend and learn more from you guys. Thank you.
That's great feedback, and we can I think we pressed this more at the beginning, but we can get interpreters here. So if you know someone who wants to join but isn't sure that they want to participate in English only, we can always arrange for an interpreter to be at these meetings as well. And this is our last evening meeting that we have scheduled. So the future meetings are either from 9 to noon or 1 to 4. So there won't be any more evening meetings. But maybe in our next communication, we can include a reminder that we can always provide an interpreter if someone needs that in almost any language.
Wow.
Thank you. We will do that in the future. We'll keep that in mind. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. It's okay if there's no feedback on the the meeting. Just want to let you guys know that our next meeting is going to be September 9th, and that one is from, oh, is it September 9th or September 7th? On the, okay, let me double check the,
Oh, that's funny.
yeah,
it's
our
on
next
my
meeting is
Ninth is
actually
a
September
Friday.
7th.
I have it on the 7th
Yeah,
in my
so our-
calendar.
Yeah, 7th.
It is the 7th, so ignore that last slide. We'll get that changed before we post it or send it out. September 7th, 1 to 4 is our next meeting. So afternoon meeting next time. Thank you guys so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it. And I know you're all tired and you definitely deserve rest. So take your extra 4 minutes and do something nice for yourself.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, guys.